Just have a look on the chart here. I just quickly want to go through the evolution and define NLP so that you know what we're talking about. Neuro obviously refers to the mind and how we organise our mental life. Linguistic is about language and how we use it, how it affects us and how it affects others. I'm sorry if I'm standing in the way. I'll read it, but I can't get out of everybody's way. Programming is about sequencing our behaviour repetitively. In other words, that's how we do a certain thing. What we believe affects what we think and how we act, so that our mind, our body and spirit meet in our beliefs. In other words, bringing the mind, the body and the spirit together, that's who we are. And that's how we're going to present ourselves. So the definition of NLP is basically that there. Glenn is correct when he says that Bandler and Grinder actually had the purpose in mind of devising almost ridiculous words to describe facets of NLP practice, because they were absolutely anti the psychological society. Because psychology, pardon me, Mark, and anybody else here is a psychologist, another psychologist, Dan, pardon me for saying so, but my experience with psychologists, it's only the love of human beings that I have in my heart that allows me to feel good about psychologists, because they put me through the ringer when I came to Queensland practicing hypnosis, when hypnosis technically wasn't legal. And but be that as it may, this was Bandler and Grinder's agenda, to work out terms that were really different. You know, I mean, what does it really mean, transderivational search? And there's all these crazy phrases. So we'll try and distill that and get rid of that. Whatever the world is really like, you and I build our reality out of our unique experiences, our culture, our language, our beliefs, our values. That's how we build a reality. Our reality. And my reality is certainly not yours. It cannot. You haven't had my experiences. I haven't had your experiences. So our realities are different. The very famous English psychiatrist, R.D. Laing, who wrote that wonderful book of poetry called Knots. One of his students said to him one day, "Professor, how real is real?" And he said, "Not very." That was his answer. It's not a bad illustration of reality. We're always hearing people talking about reality. The sort of map of our lives and our expectations that we make depends on what we notice, where we want to go, and what happens to us. That's why I said earlier that the map is not the territory. The map is not the territory. There's a story about Picasso being accosted by a stranger who asked him why he didn't paint things as they really are. And Picasso looked puzzled. Well, he said, "I don't really understand what you mean." And the man produced a photograph of his wife, and he said, "Look, like that. That's what my wife really looks like." And Picasso looked for a moment and put his hand on his chin and looked doubtful and said, "She's very small, is she not? And she's very flat." So he was really taking that man literally at his word. And in an aside also, I think, explaining his concept of his art. So if I flip over here for a moment, and we look at the underlying mission, or that's a big word, or it's a daunting word perhaps, but the underlying reason for NLP should be to unveil the deeper structure of being human. See, if I can be real with my client, you know, I had colleagues who trained with me. I went to visit them years later, and I went to their clinic and went into the door, into their waiting room, and out comes my dear friend in a white coat with a stethoscope around his neck. And I was stunned. I thought, in the intervening years, have they done some training? Did they go to medical school? Is he a doctor now? And but no, he thought that that was the only way he could project an image to his patients that he was able to do the job. And that is just so bizarre. I remember a man ringing me from Sydney who wanted to come and do a course with me, but he said, I've got to complete my voice training. I said, oh, that's interesting. He said, yes, I've just completed an NLP course, and the last part of it is voice training. Ah, I said, you sound like you've got a reasonable voice. You know, there is a voice for the hypnotherapist. There is a voice for a hypnotist, a particular tone, a particular manner of speaking. And I said, you sound pretty... Oh, no. He said, I'm studying to speak like Milton Erickson spoke. I said, why? Well, he said, I believe that if I speak in the sentences that he spoke, if I speak in the cadence in which he spoke, then I'm going to come across effectively. Be yourself. Be yourself. How can you be yourself in this way? By unveiling the deeper structure of you being human, transforming how you interact with the world. You become more attractive. You become much more able to fashion this rapport that we'll speak of, successfully blending it with this, I call an Ericksonian approach. What I mean by an Ericksonian approach is this ability to be open to whoever and whatever. You know, there's some therapists who like to talk about resistant clients, and there's some salespeople, and I know a little bit about sales in my far distant past. This is probably long before a lot of you were born. I had the Australian award for Angus and Robertson's top subscription salesman. I was supporting myself through theological college, and travelled all over Victoria and New South Wales selling the most extraordinary books to people on subscription, because they don't do that sort of thing anymore. But I do know something about sales.
I've done that.
Have you? Good. Yeah. I'm glad I've got an associate here. It's tough work, isn't it?
Yes.
It's tough work. I sold a book called The Pigeon. I didn't know a thing about pigeons, but it was this big, thick book, which was an astronomical figure for that time. I can't remember what it was, but it was called The Pigeon. And the sales manager said to me, look, all you've got to go out to country towns and find the pigeon fanciers. That's what I did. And I made a fortune. I didn't know there were so many pigeon fanciers around. So I know a little bit about sales. And I know a little bit about connecting with individuals. So my beliefs, or your beliefs, don't be frightened of this word spirituality. The Greeks thought that spirit was breath. And I said to somebody recently working with them, I said, why don't we just sit here for a little while and we're going to conspire to allow you to go into a hypnotic trance. And I said it in a jocular manner. I said, you know, the Greek, or the word conspire, from the Greek means breathe together. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to breathe together. And you'll find your way into trance. So don't be afraid of the word spirituality. Beliefs and identity, the four pillars of wisdom, rapport, that is relationship and trust either with another or with oneself, knowing what you want, and this is quite different from what is the problem. See, a lot of salespeople, a lot of therapists, a lot of human beings don't really know what they want and are really surprised that they don't get what they want because they don't know what they want and are dissatisfied with what they have. Knowing what you want and the sensory acuity, using your senses, looking at, listening to, feeling what is actually happening to you, around you, or with you. I said to you that I would read you an interesting case history. Some of you will know the name Jeannie Laborde. If you don't, you should. Her book, Influencing with Integrity. John Grinder said of Jeannie Laborde that of all the people in the world that he would want to partner in his work of NLP and management skills and negotiation, Laborde was the person. This is a wonderful book, Influencing with Integrity. This is one of Laborde's stories, and so she said the power of rapport, our first word here, the power of rapport became apparent to me when I was brought in as a communication consultant in a delicate negotiation. I received a call one Saturday morning, she said, from a distraught stranger. His attorney had recommended he learn some negotiation skills from me. Dave is the man. Dave explained that he desperately needed to learn these skills over the weekend because he was to negotiate for fees owed to him by his former boss. Well, I explained to him, she said, that 2 days would hardly give me enough time to teach him what he needed. Besides, I was conducting a seminar all weekend. Well, Dave then insisted that he would pay me to accompany him to the meeting on Monday. A large sum of money was at stake, and he felt he had the right to bring a communication consultant along. The negotiations concerned Dave's commissions from land leases agreed to but not finalised before his boss, a Mr. Smith, removed him from a project. Dave had not been fired, but he'd been transferred to another subsidiary. His contract read that if he were removed from the project, commissions for any lease agreements without final signatures were to be paid or withheld at the discretion of the firm. Smith would make the final decision about Dave's percentages. Animosity had existed between Dave and Smith for some time, but now it was worse. Dave was justifiably concerned that Smith's animosity would affect how much money he received for the leases. Dave had worked on some of these for as long as 2 years, and he was afraid he would not get any commission. I met Dave half an hour early on Monday, said Laborde, and calmed him down by having him recall resource states, she says. They were memories of times that he'd felt a sense of control, a sense of confidence, and so she encouraged him to recover those kind of feelings. He felt a sense of confidence. Then it was time to meet Smith. 4 of us assembled in Smith's office. There was Dave, there was Mr. Smith, there was Gail, who was Dave's former assistant, who was also due some commission, and then there was I. The office was a square fishbowl, glass on every side. It looked out over the forest on one side, but it also looked out over 50 cubicles where other employees were at work. When Smith learned that David had the temerity to bring a professional communicator, he threw a tantrum. She said, "I couldn't believe my eyes." He yelled, he stomped around, he threw papers off his desk, he shouted that we would not negotiate while I was in the room. Dave and Gail and I watched with amazement. The people in the cubicles didn't even look up from their work. And after about 5 minutes, Smith calmed down enough to say I could stay. But he said, "You cannot say anything." He was still agitated, but had stopped yelling and pacing and dropped into a swivel chair. I thought about his proposal for a moment and nodded my agreement, and then moved to a chair beside Dave. Gail sat on the sofa on one side, and I began to match, first of all, Smith's breathing rhythm. So this is this foundation for rapport. So that's the first thing she did. She said I began to match Smith's breathing rhythm. Gail sat on a sofa to one side, and I watched Smith as I breathed along with him. He seemed to be still slightly agitated. He tipped back in his chair, he hooked his heels over its pedestal supports, and his legs were akimbo. Well, she said I was wearing a slim skirt, so I couldn't match the lower part of his body. I could only match the upper part of his body. A few minutes later, I slowed my breathing down, very gradually, to a more comfortable rate. Smith, to my amazement, but my pleasure, followed, so that his breathing began to slow down as well. At this point, I checked Dave and found that all three of us were breathing with similar rhythms, a sign of rapport among us. And that's all I did. By that time, Dave and Smith had negotiated the first contract. Dave got the entire percentage that he felt he deserved on all 40 leases, a total of almost $100,000. In fact, Gail renegotiated some percentages which he thought Smith was being too fair to Dave. On the last few leases, Smith just asked what Dave had been promised. Dave told him, and Smith said, "OK." At the end of the hour, I shook hands with Smith, and I said to him, I really enjoyed the negotiation, even though I didn't say anything. Smith consoled me by saying, "Well, you know, listening is an important part of negotiation too. You can't win them all." And the interview was finished. The simple rapport that was engaged unconsciously with Smith through breathing and patterning the breathing and matching the upper movements of the body created a harmony. Now, you tell some people that and they think that you're stretching. You talk about interacting in that way. Think of the mother with a child, a disturbed and agitated child. Not just a mother, I've done it myself. You hold the child. Sometimes you make little noises like the child is. And slowly adjust your breathing with that child and still the child. I read in a case history of Milton Erickson's, a little girl came out of his room and the attendant, the lady behind the counter at his waiting room, greeted the little girl and said, "Did you have a nice time?" The little girl said yes, and the assistant said, and what did Dr. Erickson do? And the little girl said, he breathed me asleep. He breathed me asleep. I was faced with a young woman, young mother with agoraphobia. And she'd arranged for this child to be looked after, her child to be looked after, so she could come to the session. She turned up to my rooms with the child. And a young child crying. And I said to her, look, you know, we're not going to be able to do anything. My wife tried to take the baby and console the baby, wouldn't be consoled, wouldn't go to my wife, yelled all the louder, and I said, look, I don't think we can do this. In fairness to you, we shouldn't do it. And she said, look, I've made this effort to come out. She said, I haven't left my home except under great anxiety a number of times. She said, please do something for me. I remembered this story, and I hoped for the best. And so the young woman sat in the chair, we reclined the chair, she had the child lying over her laps, this little kid had on a pair of leather shoes, and had a leather seat, and so she started kick, 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 like this, and I'm telling you, I might have looked calm, I don't even know that I looked calm, but I certainly was panicking inside, and profusely sweating, because what can I do? I wanted to help the young woman, but what can you do under these circumstances? And I remembered that story. And I just started patting the child to the beat of her kicking of her shoes. And to my astonishment, and I didn't expect it, to my astonishment, the child went to sleep. And I was able to work with that person. So it's a powerful part of obtaining rapport. If you were to have a client and you were sitting down, and not all clients, as you know, you don't need me to tell you, but not all clients, behave just like you want them to behave. They're as different as personalities, and there are such interesting ways of interacting with the individual, so that the first thing that one would do, if you were wanting to begin to, I don't like to use the word control, but I'm going to use it anyway, because that's what you really want to do. You want to control the situation. So what do? You sit and quietly adjust your breathing, first of all, and whatever behaviours. If somebody's sitting like this, I usually cross my arms too. If somebody's got their legs crossed, I will cross my leg too. Now, you have to be subtle about this, otherwise you're going to get a punch in the nose. But it requires subtlety. But that matching is effective. Can I use you as a guinea pig?
Yep.
Okay. I'll have to sit just a wee bit higher than you. Now you know I'm a hypnotist, don't you?
Yes.
Does that worry you? Well, that's really good. Do you mind me sitting? Sit closer. And this is the other part of the situation. See, what's your name?
Mickey.
Mickey. All right, Mickey. I could sit here with Mickey. Well, we've got this big empty space in front of us. So I'm not really comfortably in touch with you. I mean, we wouldn't be saying this to you if you were the client. But if I were here, like this wouldn't be comfortable either. No. So there's a right space. There's a right dynamic of that space. It is okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what I'd like you to do, I want to put your pen and paper down. Maybe like that. I would just like you to see just what it feels like for you to be in rapport with me, insofar, in this case, you're breathing. But I'm going to get you to do it, not me. So I just want you to watch me. I'll do the talking, but I want you to watch me the way I breathe. Gee, I just got in, Mickey. I've been seeing a client, and I forgot about their appointment, and here I am, ready to go.
Am I supposed to say something?
No, I just wanted the reaction that you gave us then. Not appropriate, is it?
No.
Not appropriate. But let's say that you were doing it. Let's say that you came in and you were a bit out of breath because you'd had to park a fair way away and you're coming in and I know that I have something that would interest you, but I want to connect with you. Because you're going to apologise to me. You're going to say, oh, gee, I'm sorry, I feel like this, or I overlooked the appointment time and I should have allowed myself. So you want to do all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I want to do, first of all, let you say those things. I can't stop you, and I don't want to stop you because, but I'll say to you, calmly and quietly, well, that's okay. You're here now. So I wonder if you'd just like to let yourself listen to something that I think will be of interest to you. You're breathing with me, remember?
Yeah.
Well, let's not worry about the words. Just breathe. But what do you feel?
I felt really calm.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So, what was it? I asked you to breathe with me so you could have that experience. If I were doing it, and this person, I wouldn't be telling them that's what I was doing, but I would be doing it. But I would know that I was going to help that person experience calmness, simply because we'd breathe together. Now, this was quite deliberate in what we did. But if I were to just let me put my hypnotist hat on for a minute, but we won't do hypnosis as such. But if I just said to you verbally, because it's hard to do it when you know what I'm doing, but if I say to you verbally, just take a nice deep breath in. Just feel it. And now let it go. Just breathe out. And just allow yourself to feel that feeling of calmness flowing down through your arms and legs, into your hands and feet. Very next time you take another deep breath. And breathe out. Okay. And if I sit and talk to you quietly, I talk to you about something that's of interest to you, something that you're going to benefit from, and we breathe along together, we could foster that calmness. Okay, so that's just one aspect of rapport, but it's one means of gaining rapport. You know, if I look over this group of people, some of you are going to get your arms, some of you are writing, some people are looking, and that's so. This is a group, but one-on-one, we have great opportunities provided we are prepared to be subtle, and subtlety is a kind. Now you can't. The person comes in all puffy like this. You can't do that, but you can breathe along with them without making any necessary noises that they make, and slowly slow your breathing down. Would you accept, I hope you do, when I tell you that about a third of the hypnotic inductions that I engage in with clients is simply done on that basis. An old client of mine, a golfer, professional golfer, rang me at home. I hadn't heard from him for about 3 or 4 years. And a few weeks ago, he rang me at home and he said, game's gone to pot. He said, I've been tossing up my mind whether you'd be willing to see me. I know you don't see many sporting people these days. And he said, I had to pluck up the courage to ring you, but I'm asking you, should I come and see you? Well, I said, why would you ask me to tell you that you should come and see me? Tell me about your game. And so he told me about his game. And I responded to him. And I said, Jeff, I can't give you an appointment now. I said, what about you ring me in a week or 10 days' time? And let's see what we need to do. So a week later, he rang me. When I picked up the phone, he says, Jeff here, you bugger. Like this. I said, what? He said, what did you do to me on the phone? He said, I went out and got an eagle after I talked to you on the phone. I said, what do you think I did to you on the phone? I said, you and I have had enough experience with NLP, with hypnosis, with embedded suggestions. Well, he said, it certainly worked for me. I said, you come to see me? No, he said, I don't need to. Your speech, your breathing patterns, your connectedness with your client can add power to your game, can add power to whatever it is that you do. And as you said, it becomes very hard to break it up because it becomes second nature. I look around here and I can see all kinds of lower lips. How many times have you looked at your client's lower lip? Do you know that the lower lip is very, very difficult to control? You could go like this if you want to, or you could pull it in like this, but I'm talking about observing the lower lip of the person. What if I suggested to you that for the next week you spend a bit of time watching the lower lip of the people that you talk to?
We all will.
We will.
Whether we want it or not, we will. It's our mission.
In hypnosis, that's something I teach my students to look for, because it's an indicator of them, of their subject relaxing and beginning to respond more to their unconscious processes than their conscious processes. Just think about it when you're relaxed. Maybe thinking about just some nice experience that you've had in the past. And letting your face and your jaw relax. So you need to do a little bit of mirror gazing, checking yourself out, but looking at other people. And then putting it together and seeing what that means when you look at enough people and you become aware enough of what this lower lip actually looks like. And then there are skin colour changes that occur with people. Well, we all know the one when a person gets really mad and really gets uptight, the face flushes and they get very red in the face. But who can I pick on if I don't mind? Picking. I know you, so I'll pick on you. Okay. So, if it's terrible to say this to you, Irina, if I look at you, I can see a kind of yellow colour there, you know, and I can see a pink there. I can see a darker colouring there. You're working too much, not sleeping enough. So I see that. So I've now got 1, 2, 3, 4 colours.
And pimple in here.
Oh, I missed that. I would think that if you really train yourself, you will see not just a person that we could say is Caucasian, or a person that we say has an Asian background, but here, this is a smooth-faced young man. But as I look at Nathan, let me just count what I can see. Well, I can certainly see 6 or 7 different shades in your face. One of Laborde's exercises was to have her students, she said, be like Picasso. She said, go and have a look at a Picasso painting and see how many different colours he displays in the painting of a face. And then she said, be like Picasso, and with your partner or with somebody that doesn't know you're watching them, look at the face and keep on looking at faces until you have decoded the number of colours that can show in a face. As people shift emotionally, changes occur. We're lucky in hypnotic work. I can tell you that when a person begins to relax under the influence of a hypnotic trance, the face elongates. Then these 2 lines here, as the person gets deeper into the trance, become quite heavily pink, almost red there. Now, it's not because I've told this person that you've got to do that. It just happens automatically. The lower lip pouts, and as the face elongates. Now, that's easy. That's hypnosis. In a sense, the person is extremely passive. You have a more difficult job because you're doing it kind of cold turkey. But if you can teach yourself to recognise breathing rhythms, facial changes, colour in the face, in the process, and this is the secret, I think, that in the process of achieving that and building that in as a skill of your own, you also project a sense of calmness. You project a sense of control. Because you are building a relationship with this person at a non-verbal level. Now, the verbal congruency is another thing. But just for a moment or two, turn to this lady next to you. And look at her. And
I got it every day.
and see if you can identify some colour changes. How many?
How many coloured areas or?
On the whole face.
It's not changing yet.
No, but it doesn't have to change.
Oh, just
Identify what's
areas,
there.
yeah, areas, yeah.
Identify what's there.
Well, eyes, obviously, yeah, forehead, cheeks, chin.
So how many colours?
Four.
4 or 5. Okay. Well, I reckon that if you were really on the job and you persisted that, you'll probably come up with about 10. So then what does that mean? That's the next question. It's fine if you do it, but does it have a meaning? Well, here's the meaning. That in the process, you are learning, first of all, the demeanour of the person, and as you begin to add the verbal in, then you watch to see the changes that occur. They will occur in their breathing. A hypnotised person, if you make a reference to a hypnotised person, and the test of, or the broad test of the person in hypnosis, that breathing becomes very shallow and quite long between the intake and the exhale. But mention something. Maybe it's some issue that they have raised in the history taking, and you mention that, and you'll see the person, even though they're still deeply in trance, they'll begin to breathe differently, because their breathing response is connected with whatever emotions they're feeling at the time. So let's say we put those two things together. The look that we see in the person as we begin to converse. We're also noticing the way that they breathe. If I go back to Laborde, the example I gave, she had a limitation. She'd worn a slim, tight skirt, and so there were limitations in her ability to mirror completely this person. But breathing and upper body matching was sufficient, it seems, in this detail, was sufficient to allow that man to come down from that tantrum stage and to be able to negotiate. You cannot discount the effect that simple mirroring and matching happens. I had a client, a businessman, years ago, whose son rang him when he was in an executive meeting of directors. His son wanted to talk to him, and the father refused to come to the phone. It's one of those terrible tragedies. About half an hour later, his son shot himself. This man came to me, from memory, I think, maybe 5 or 6 months after this tragedy. And in that time, the rest of the family, a daughter, the wife, and he had begun to fragment. And he came and he told me a story. And of course, I'm touched by this. I'm a father, I'm a human being, I could feel this. And I'll call him George. He would sit with his arms resting on his thighs with his head down. And I saw him 3 or 4 times, and every time, and understandably, every time he would tell this story to me. He was obsessed with it. And I knew that I could never help him just by saying, oh look, it's time you got over it. I mean, you can't say that. You can't say to him, look, you know, life happens. You can't say that. So I said to him this day, I said, George, do you have any doubts about my sympathy with you, my feeling for you? He said, none whatsoever. I said to him, look, let me say this lovingly. As a friend, I have heard your story many, many times, and I want you to tell me that story once again today. And I want you to do this. I want you to sit up straight. I said, I want you to elevate your eyes and look up to the ceiling while you tell me. He got about halfway through the story, and he put his head down and he said, I can't do this, David. I said, exactly. Exactly. What has happened is unchangeable. But you altered your posture, and you found yourself unable to tell this story. I wonder if you'd do it again. I asked him to look up towards the ceiling again. And I wonder if you just take a really deep breath in. Fill your lungs. Trust me. Hold your breath. Lower your eyelids over your upturned eyes. And then exhale. Now I knew something he didn't know. Looking up, like that, just to the edge of strain. Taking a deep breath in, bringing your eyelids down over your upturned eyes, automatically causes this left brain dominance to shift to right brain dominance. That's the hypnotic state. Within 2 or 3 minutes, this guy's breathing in a very relaxed, very comfortable way. Now, that's a story but with extremes. But posture. Let's say you've got somebody. Let's say Mickey comes in and she's wanting to buy a house or wanting to buy something from me. Maybe a set of subscription books. I'll do a bit of nostalgia. And you're coming in to see me, and you've got a sad story to tell me. So your shoulders are slumped, and you're going to tell me your story. And just gradually, I add in the breathing and a slight shift in posture, just gradually. I might start off where you are with my shoulders rounded, but I slowly, very subtly, over a period of time, alter my posture. And along with my breathing, I change the way you feel and think. Some of you might have seen me on TV. I worked with a lady who had a phobia, a very intense phobia. Beyond Productions had taken her to one of the tallest buildings in Brisbane, 32 floors, sat her in a lift and terrified her because she had this phobia. And they kept the door open, so she knew she could get out. But they filmed her scrabbling away there. Then they brought her, they'd invited me to participate in a show, and they brought her along, and she couldn't fly, she couldn't travel in lifts. When she was a little girl of 4 or 5, her uncle, who wasn't much more aged than her, had put her in a suitcase as a game and carted her around a little bit in the suitcase, and so from 5 onwards she's got this intense feeling of claustrophobia. So the lady comes in, and we've got the film of it, and she sits down and she wants to tell me what the problem is, and so she starts to tell me, but starts to weep and becomes very emotional. And I listened to her, and at one stage I said to her, I'm just going to touch you on the arm there, and I'll tell you what I mean about that afterwards. And I touched her on the arm. And I heard the story out, and I said, tell me, has there been a time in your life when, by your standards, you did something that gave you a sense of superiority and a sense of satisfaction, and you felt like you'd arrived? And she thought for a minute, and she said, well, yeah, she said, strangely. And she told me about her work as a chef in a London hotel, and some minor royalty had turned up, and she was preparing this meal for her. And I could see by this lovely look on her face, she really liked this. And I was around the other side of her, and I just gave her a touch on the right arm, just as she was telling me this. And I said, well, let's just use, and I explained that I had observed both of the emotions, and I had touched either arm at what I saw was the peak of the emotion, and created an anchor. And it wasn't difficult to explain that. I said, what we've done now, we've created a connection between my touch and your emotional feeling. And I want to show you that. And so I touched her on the right arm. And this big smile came on her face, and she said, God, she said, I can smell the chicken. like this, you see. And this is something that happened about 15 or 16 years ago. And I said, what chicken? She said, the chicken I prepared for this special meal in the hotel. I said, that's terrific. I said, you're only going to have to feel this one more time. And I went like that on her left arm. And she drew herself together, gave a little shake. And I pulled my hand away. I said, now, I'm going to touch this arm, but I'm going to touch that one at the same time. I touched that, both together, and this beautiful smile. And 3 weeks later, and I'm cutting a long story short, but 3 weeks later, they stuck her in that lift, 32 floors. She went in it by herself. She made the journey, except with a cameraman with her, and she went to the top. And we got her on film. She said, well, that was no big deal. And I now know that she's flown a number of times overseas since that experience. We are a walking container of emotion, of beliefs, of expectations. And this is the client that walks into your rooms or your business. So you want to know as much as you can about them, but not the history part of it. What you want to know is what they think, what they feel. And so as you talk with them, you build yourself the sort of rapport that we got in that case history there. We are creating, or we're endeavouring to create, and every client I see, you know, this practice probably sees 40 or 50 people a week. And that mightn't sound a lot of people to you, but when we consider that we see most of them for 2 hours or 1.5 hours, then that's a fair swag. And maybe it's more than that, I don't know, because there are a number of therapists here. But the point I'm making is this, that every one of those people walk in here and most of them don't know what to expect. So what do we have to do? You can't just say, well, that's great, I'm glad you came along, I'm going to hypnotise you now. That would be useless. That would be ineffective. When we get to that part, you are so connected comfortably with me, you might know it, but you're feeling okay about me. And because you feel okay about me, then it's logical that we can take the next steps. Now, extrapolating my experience to some of your experience, where you are meeting strangers every day, that's you. Then if you can come up with one strategy, awareness of what that person's posture means, what that person's breathing rate is at that moment that you meet, and you have the skill to interact with that person. Somebody said, and I don't know whether it's a stretch or not, but somebody said that when I mirror or match somebody, I'm causing them to be like me. This person said, and I say, it's not my thought, but they said, and I think that helps them like me. If every client that you had, you could say with absolute certainty, they like me, that would be pretty good, wouldn't it? That would be the dragons and, and the witches and all the people that come along that ordinarily you mightn't invite home for dinner, but in some way you could make a connection with them. Not every person comes into a clinic like this. You don't think to yourself, oh, thank God they've come. You know, that's not what you think. Because we're no different to anybody else. You have certain reservations about certain people. But when you stop and ask yourself, as Glenn suggested, when you stop and ask yourself, why am I feeling that? What am I reading out of this? What am I getting from this? Instead of just dismissing it and thinking to yourself, oh, well, I've got to do better, I've got to do this, or I've got to get past this person. You know, one of the great teachers that I had in my training made this statement, and I didn't believe it when I first heard him say it. But he said there are no resistant subjects. He said there are only inept hypnotists. Let's extrapolate that.
Can I just ask you something?
Yes.
Have you ever studied hairdressers? Like, have you ever thought that, you know, like I know people think a hairdresser is just about cutting hair, but...
They're counsellors.
Absolutely. Everything you've just said. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Have you ever had it?
No.
Anyone ever studied or...
Have I had a hairdresser?
Have you ever had anyone do a study on them or a...
I think there's been quite a few studies on them. Unfortunately, a lot of studies have been tongue-in-cheek because they're kind of dismissed. But I think they're probably the first line of counsellors.
Yeah, everything you've just said.
Yeah. I'd have to think about what I've just said now. But can you see that there's a valid connection to how you could interact and how you would interact with clients? Now, we're only scratching the surface. Yes?
Can I just something just occurred to me there. I mean, the comment about hairdressers and rapport, that's why you go back.
Beg pardon?
That's why you go back.
Mm-hmm.
It's not because of the quality of the haircut, necessarily.
Mm.
It's the rapport.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the crux of what I'm wanting to convey too, because this is what it's about. Because out there, I mean, I don't know any of you, but if, let's say that I was one of you, and that you guys are the clients that come along either wanting to sell, wanting to buy, wanting to rent or whatever, then how am I going to connect with you? Because in reality, I am no different to somebody else down the street. You know, in this block here, there's about half a dozen real estate agents. So there's one little lady that gets a picture all over the bus stops around here, and I don't know what she's like, but I do know that she's, in the past anyway, been extremely successful salesperson. But the point I'm making to you is this, that we can't be concerned about, you know, this bloke or that bloke. I mean, I've been around long enough, you know, that I get my students come and say, oh gee, you know, there's these people have started up over there and these people have started up there. You know, we could have a hypnotherapist on every corner and we still wouldn't be any different than we are today. We would make for ourselves a client base, and that client base would be on the basis of our skills and our ability to connect with people. So yes, you're right, that rapport is what brings people to us. So how important is it then for you to begin to be able to be skillful in creating rapport? Look how nice it was that you and I just did a little bit of breathing together. And you said you felt calm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, when you were breathing fast, I actually could feel my blood temperature or my pulse raise and everything.
Sure.
Yeah, and then I felt really calm.
Sure.
Difference.
My dear old father-in-law had some bypass surgery, and we were visiting him in the hospital, and they had this big monitor up the top with his pulse rate, and we were quietly talking to him. It was sort of ticking down around where it should have been, but his brother-in-law came in. Doesn't get on that well with his brother-in-law. His brother-in-law walks over to the bed and tick, 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 up goes the pulse rate. There. Here is a person relatively passive, just come out of heart surgery. But here's the telltale evidence up here. Don't think that doesn't happen when you and I are interacting with individuals. If I can discover some skills to enable me to interact in that way, that I create a beneficial atmosphere between this individual and myself, I'm going to do better. You know, I think, I mean, I'm a bit of a rationalist. In my head, I think that little thing I told you about being like me, therefore they like me, that seems a bit of a stretch for me because it's a bit tricky in my mind. However, in practicality, that's the way it is. That's the way it is. I would like to take a moment to do something really interesting to just show you how an unconscious mind actually works. And poor Mickey, I'm going to ask you to be my guinea pig. Okay. Glenn, can we have that rolly chair? Just roll it in here and give that to Mickey.
You know what?
Yeah, what's the chair? That's all right.
You know what the magic one?
Magic.
You know what company one for?
Oh, no, we don't need the magic chair.
What's the magic chair?
You want to sit in there?
The country rocket chair.
Oh, this one here. This will put it back. Oh, it's a bit high. This will leave it. So your feet can touch down. Oh, sorry. Is that right? Okay. Do you mind if I sort of sit above you like this? I just want people to see. Now, what I'm going to do is just use a little experimental procedure that came out of Stanford University about 20 years ago. And all I'm going to do is to ask you to do a couple of things which are reasonable. There are a couple of other things that may seem unusual, but they're simple things. And then, when we've accomplished those few things, I'm going to sort of tell you a childish kind of story. Just make something simple. And you'll be sitting there with your eyes closed, and all I want you to do is to imagine any element of what I tell you, and we'll see in what way that has an effect upon you or what you do. Now, that sounds pretty mysterious, doesn't it? But it's not really. It's just that I want you to know everything that's going to happen, because I think you're pretty brave doing this. I'm going to ask you in a moment. Remember I talked a little while ago about looking up towards... Okay, I'm going to ask you to do that. I'm going to ask you then to take a deep breath in, and then I'm going to ask you to bring your eyelids down, and then hold that for maybe 10 seconds. Are you a smoker?
No.
Okay, so you'd be able to hold your breath for 10 seconds without any trouble. Some smokers can't. So we'll say 10 seconds. When I give you the signal, you don't have to remember this, I'll do it step by step, but just so you know what's coming.
Yeah.
When I give you the signal, I'm going to say, exhale. Now, the interesting thing is that you'll probably feel like, some people say they kind of float down from the sensation. But it doesn't matter, because the most important thing is you imagining what I'm going to describe to you. This is a way that we can show the rest of the group just how our imagination works and how people are much more complex than they might appear on the surface, and therefore it's important for us to be able to interact with them. So can you rest your arms on the arms of the chair like that? Is that comfortable enough?
That's fine.
Okay. All right, let's do it. Look up towards your eyebrows, like just like that, as far as you can.
Up to zero.
Okay, look like that. That's right. While you're looking up, just slowly bring your eyelids down over your upturned eyes. Just do it. That's right. Now I'm just going to touch you on the forehead so that you know where to look behind your closed eyelids. Look up to about there. Can you do that?
Yeah.
Okay, keep your eyes looking up. I want you to breathe in deeply now. Feel your lungs. Hold. So you're holding your eyes up. You're holding your breath. Just for a few more seconds. When I give you the signal, not yet, but when I give you the signal, you exhale, you lower your eyes, and keep them closed. Do it now. Breathe out. Relax your eyes. Really good. Really good. Now sit there for a moment or two with your eyes closed while you listen to the story that I want to tell you. I'm going to ask you to imagine this, that say just about there, on your wrist. A really soft cord is tied around the front, just in front of your watch, just tied around your wrist. The cord then is 2 metres long, we've got left over. Let's say we borrow from the Weather Bureau, just you imagining this, we borrow a really big gas-filled balloon that's lighter than air, and we tie that in on the other end of the cord. But I've got my foot on it, I'm holding the cord down, so it's not going to float, but it is attached to your wrist there. I want you to just imagine what might happen if I move my foot back and let that balloon begin to float free. I think, first of all, the cord, all the slack in the cord would be taken up as the balloon ascends. And then I think you'd feel something like this. You'd feel the cord tighten on your wrist. And without any muscle effort on your part, your hand, your arm would just begin to lift as that balloon just floated up, floating your hand, your arm, up in this upright position, just like that. But you know what? There's a ceiling up there, and the balloon is just about to hit the ceiling, and it can't go any further. And your hand connected to that balloon through the cord, the balloon's bobbing away against the ceiling, and your hand is just floating there really nicely, just like that. Well, in a moment or two, I'm going to count from 1 to 3. And as I count from 1 to 3, when you hear me say that third number, I want you to open your eyes and look at me, but leave your hand just where it is now. 1. 2. 3. Open your eyes. Feel kind of a bit dreamy-eyed? Yeah. Did you get a colour of the balloon?
No, I just saw a really big balloon.
A really big balloon.
Mm.
Okay. It's interesting because you said I saw it.
Yeah.
If I'd been here and you'd been telling the story, I would say I heard the rustle of the rope or the cord as it was being pulled up, and I heard the squeaky sound of the balloon up against the ceiling. But you saw just a balloon. Okay. Let me show you something really interesting. In a moment, I'm going to take this hand of yours and I'm going to put it down on the arm of the chair. And I want you to just be like me, an observer. Pretend it doesn't belong to you anymore. And when I put your hand back there on the arm of the chair and I let it go, you watch it. It's going to want to float right back up there all by itself. Don't stop it happening, but you don't make it happen. Just be an observer, just like me. So here we go. All the way down. A little boy told me the other day, when I was doing this, he said, "You're pulling the balloon back down." So let's say that your fingertips reach there. You ready? Watch your hand. You'll see what happens. Okay. You're not doing it, are you? Who's doing it? Well, you don't even have to think about it. This is going to go right back up there, all by itself.
That's weird.
It is weird. Does that hand feel different to that hand?
Yeah, it feels really light.
This one feels light.
Yeah,
Mhm.
really light.
But you know, when you came in, if I said, "Hey, come in here and we'll weigh your arms, weigh your hands," they'd have been about the same, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Now it feels light. I wonder why it feels light.
Because there's a balloon on it.
Because there's a balloon on it. That's pretty excellent. I'm going to take these two fingers. I'm going to give you a little tap on the elbow there. and all that lightness is going to go away, and it'll be your arm again. You'll own it, and it's Merlin's.
Oh.
Sorry, I didn't mean that. Come down like that. That balloon went down pretty fast. Now, what I wanted you guys to observe, I took her through a little exercise there, but my counting, 1, 2, 3, instead of bringing her out, I was helping her to relax even more. And I didn't bother to ask you, but I noticed that when you opened your eyes, you went like that first. They didn't open immediately, did they?
No.
No, no. So when I said, I was watching, one. And then she took another quicker breath, so I left that one alone. Because I wanted to be really involved in the exhale. And she took a second breath. And I said, 2. So I let my breath come into that. 2. So I'm conveying verbally, but auditorily, something, as well as the matching process. And then I waited a little bit. And you were so good. You took this nice deep breath in, and I waited for you, and then I said, 3. And breathe out as I said it. So I knew you've been hypnotised.
I'll be just saying.
Yep.
I thought so.
Okay, well, only lightly, just a little bit, but just enough for your or subconscious mind to accept an idea. So I said, just a matter of fact way, I'll look in a moment or two when I move my hand away from your arm. You watch it. It's going to move in the air. And the first thing it did was just move, little jerky movement like that. That's called in psychology an unstructured, unconscious movement. But what we were getting from you is an idiomotor, mind, motor activity that you hadn't thought about. You were waiting to see what was going to happen. 2 things I wanted to show out of that is that the unconscious mind is open to suggestion. You might think this, well, so what? I knew that. But there's a difference between knowing it and using it. And we don't have to have somebody, like this, or watching a watch, or listening to a metronome tick or anything. We don't have to do that. If I were to say to Mickey, I'm not picking on you, but you're such a nice person, I can tell, then I thought, well, you make a good subject to demonstrate this. But if I said to Mickey, just begin to become aware of where you're sitting, the way the chair supports you. What am I doing? I'm making statements that aren't arguable. See? So the yes set is being elicited. I might go on and say that you can hear the sound of the air conditioner. You can be aware of your feet flat on the floor. I wonder when you begin to notice that round the centre of your being is a kind of a calm, nice feeling beginning to develop. That's a hypnotic induction. But we can take that kind of language and adjust the terminology to what's appropriate for you in what you do. And you can work with people, in my terms, I would be saying informal induction of trance. I had a friend, well, when I say friend, it was a student, who became a friend many, many years ago. His wife, for religious reasons, was really upset that he'd been studying hypnosis. And he said, you know, if only she would come and talk to you, and, you know, she wouldn't feel like this. He had a contract to go to London in his work, and she originally was going to go, and because of this disagreement, she decided, no, I'm not going. She said, we'll see what happens over there, and and I may come later, or I may wait till you just come back to Australia. And so he said, if only I could get her to come and see you, I'm sure that we could do something. I don't know what the we was, but anyway, he hadn't been very successful in persuasion with her. But I suggested that I rang her and invited her to come and talk to me. So I said, just so you can understand more of what Michael's doing. And I said, I'm not going to try and make you a convert to this. I said, I know you have your reasons for not being very happy about what he's done, but maybe if you understood it a little better. And so I arranged to meet them in my daughter's home, so that we weren't meeting in a clinic or anything like that. And I don't live in Brisbane, and I didn't at that time, and so we met in my daughter's place in New Farm. And we sat in the lounge, and we talked for about an hour about everything, and it was very frosty in the beginning, and it was very warm by the time we'd finished. And he called me the next day, and he said, you will have to tell me what you did, because he said everything's changed. And when he got to London, he wrote me again and told me that he was getting 2 and 3 love letters a week from her, who was committed because of her decision to stay in Australia for a while, but finally she threw a job in and went over. But he said, what did you do? Well, I didn't tell you, as I told him, that all I did was embedded suggestions and ideas as I conversed. And I used the tone of my voice to mark out certain words. See, as a hypnotist, I wouldn't say, I really want you to go down. How incongruent is such a word, such a phraseology? But what I would say is, as you begin to relax, you'll find yourself feeling like you're drifting down. So my word is down, but it's conveying a meaning beyond the word by the intonation and so on. So in talking to this young woman and Michael, her husband, that's simply what I did. Now somebody might say, well gee, that's manipulative. Well, I'm sorry, but manipulation is something that we're doing all the time, and I certainly did it with a good heart and a good purpose, and it worked out wonderfully well for both the relationship and clarity for her about what was done. I can promise you that as I sat there with that person, I watched her breathe. I watched the stiff, I won't say what nationality she was because you'd think I was racist, but she was a European of a certain stern personality. And I watched this person slowly loosen up. And I loosened up with her, my posture, but in a very subtle way. And just in the same way that I appeared to be doing one thing with Mickey, but I was doing something else. When I told you that in a moment I'm going to count from 1 to 3, and when I say 3, you can open your eyes and look at me. That's what I said. But I had another agenda too. So when I say 1, I've done it in concert with your breathing. So even though I'm telling you 1, 2, 3 will wake you up or bring you out or you'll open your eyes, the intent of what I'm doing is contrary to that. 1, 2, 3. So I've let my voice drop, I've let that rhythm take place in there, and I've got the message across that I wanted to get, but the words were saying something else. They were conveying something else. So I don't mean to tell you that this is easy. But if you don't start, and as so, you can be so anonymous in your doing. Right. What is your name?
Cherie.
Cherie. Okay. So let's say I was sitting with you, Cherie. This is the way I'd sit. With you. Because that's what you do. and I'd catch up with whatever rhythm of breathing that you were exhibiting at that time. And if it was nice and relaxed, like you look here, like you are, then I don't have to do anything. But if there's a purpose in having you breathe even more slowly, then I know that you're going to feel more calm. You're also going to feel okay towards me, not just at a conscious level, but at a subconscious level. So that's part of it. So look how easily and anonymously you can practice these things. And if you've got that one as your starting point, just to spend some time mirroring and matching. Don't pick, you know, if you've got somebody sitting here like this or kicking their leg up and down, you know, don't start off with something like that. So like I say, you might end up with your eyes on it. but just look at it. Look at Nathan there. You know? He's the soul of rapture. He's really listening on the edge of his seat. Okay, so that's what I would be doing if that was useful as a starting point. I'd be looking at the way he's breathing, but he's like you, he's very relaxed in his breathing. But I could say something to him that would change his breathing and change his blood pressure. See? Easily. But I don't want to do that because that's not in my purpose. And so what I'm saying to you is that these are real skills. These are reality. And this is a real way of getting your clients connected to you. And for goodness sake, that's what we all want.
I found, David, with that, just on a practice point of view, I, for a couple of years, trained at Ray White's head office. So I had, because I couldn't be bothered parking, so I drove in, I trained in and trained home to and from, a 3/4 of an hour train trip. With no, I was never even going to talk to these people, but I picked a certain person on the train and I practiced. So 3/4 of an hour in, 3/4 of an hour out. Just practice, with no intention of ever communicating, selling or doing anything, but just practicing. So if you could find a time, maybe for the next week, without, working on your client that you're dealing with at that time, but just practice on people you have no intention until you get very good at it, as David's describing.
Can I use you as an example? Are you feeling pretty calm now?
Just
When you got into silhouette there, it was really interesting to look at your lower lip. Now you're pulling it up. But you see, it seemed to signal to me that you're calm, you're relaxed, and I think you're probably enjoying this. So, I'm going to give you a CD called Just Relax, just for you.
Oh, thank you.
Because of what you've done. It's me on the CD. Don't play it in your car. but it'll be a nice little payback. I know what you think.
Question.
Yes.
What if you meet a client, a potential customer, and he's being very aggressive, or defensive, this way, folding arms. So do you fold together with him? But will he feel that you're not being professional, or you're being aggressive as well? You are the agent, and you want.
Not so much aggressive,
Yeah.
but I'd be happy to tune in to the way he was breathing, and if there was posture that was reasonable to mirror, I would do that. But I would have in my mind, just like that man with the suicidal son. I got him to. I mean, this is quite extreme, but I got him to take an extreme, different posture. None of his emotions were connected to that new posture. So that's what your job is. Here is this guy who's aggressive, he's angry perhaps, maybe something has occurred that's made him angry, and so you might start with breathing the way he is, but just sooner rather than later getting a little beat behind him and slowly bringing your breathing down, and if it were appropriate, to mirror whatever his physical posture was, then you would do that. But the most important element of all is the breathing part of it, and then the winding of it down. Because as we've said tonight, I talk about the conspire, is that our emotions and feelings are hooked right in to our breathing rhythm. And changing the breathing can change the feelings, change the emotional response. Anybody got any questions? I've been rabbiting on for a bit. Yes.
What particular parts of my face change colours?
What particular part of yours?
Anyone's face.
Okay. You want to sit in your chair? Come and sit out the front, Michael. And we'll see if we can. You don't mind if we make you the person in the hot seat? Okay. Well, just turn around to these guys here first up and let them look at you. Is it too cold? Okay, well, you don't mind if I sort of pick you over a bit? Okay, well, let's start with his chin. Because he's got a bit of a bristle there, then there's obviously a different colour range there. And then over here, you've got this line here with colour in that, and you can't see for the light perhaps, but I can see colour there that is different to the colour that's there. And then you've got a different colour here, and different colour here. I don't know you.
No, I mean, like, is there certain, like actual muscles or whatever that change?
Well, they will.
So keep an eye for the particular parts?
Well, they will, because they're going to reveal a bit. I was just about to say that I don't know you. But if I said something really rude to you, that'd change your colour, wouldn't it? You're even thinking about it now. You see, but what I'm hoping that we can do is to show the value of observation.
These places are sort of like the line there, the chin and the cheek.
Yeah.
And probably.
Yeah, obviously change colour wherever, but like what particular parts to look out for?
Beg your pardon?
I was trying to ask what particular parts to look out for.
Well, I'd be looking at the whole of you, but I'd be taking in the way you breathe. I'd be taking away how tight your shoulders are. I'd be taking away, in my mind, I'd be taking away the information to be sitting there like that. And what I'd really like is for you to be sitting there like that. Yeah. So, I'm not going to tell you that, but I'm telling you what will be going on in my head. And so my objective would be, see, you've relaxed a bit more now, but my objective would have been, if you had been sitting like that, what I know is you're trying to ferret out information from me, and that's fair enough. There's nothing wrong with that, but that mightn't be useful to the actual encounter that we have. So I will be looking for a way to breathe with you and allow you to just be a bit more comfortable, more than you were when you first came and sat there. So it's the total picture that we're interested in. We're going to look at very quickly, and I know that some people will know this, but we're going to look at very quickly the signals that we give with our eyes. See, would you sit? Do you mind being a bit of a subject? No, look at about there. They can see you. When you telephone me, we had a really bad connection, and but I got your name as Michael Connolly. So immediately I think, Michael Connolly, he wrote the poet. So I start thinking about, and then there's a bit of a gap, and the line half drops out, and you tell me you can't hear me, and I ask you your name again, just to be sure, and you tell me Michael Connolly. Okay. Is your name Michael Connolly?
Yes.
Do you remember that phone call we made?
Yeah.
Okay. What if I were to ask you, have you ever thought about calling yourself Andrew?
I've never thought about it.
Never thought about it. Okay, did you see what he did? His eyes went away like this. So,
Actually looked at the camera.
but you see, what we're really talking about are unconscious processes.
Yeah. Picturing.
I'll tell you what a good thing is. Turn the 7:30 report on, turn the sound down, especially when they're interviewing a politician. Turn the sound down and watch the eyes of the politician. If you leave the sound up, you would know what the questions were. And if you turn it down really quickly before he answered and then watch his eyes, you'd be able to tell how many lies he's telling. You'd be able to tell whether he's telling the truth, whether he's making something up. So let me just flip this over. I'm not finished with you, but let me flip this over for a moment. Just for those folk who don't know about this. Now let me say that this is not like the Word of God. This is not the unwritten law of the Medes and the Persians. But it is true often enough that it's useful to really know where people are coming from. So what this means is when the eyes look in this direction, you're getting a visual construction.
Can I get some clarity here? Are you talking about how the person's eyes, how the eyes of the person you're looking at behave?
Yes.
So in other words, I'm looking at that picture, and you say if the eyes go that way, this is what you can possibly interpret. Is that what you say?
As you look at it.
Yeah.
So that's a face looking back at it.
Yes, thank you.
Glenn was showing me a video this afternoon, which was really interesting. There was this guy who was doing a promo, you correct me if I tell this wrong, but he was doing a promo for dog grooming. And do we have the sound on? Or?
Yes, we did.
We have the sound on, okay. So this guy's presenting himself. Now he's an advertising man, he's not a dog groomer at all. And he makes the statement that he's had many years of experience dog grooming. And he lifts his eyes up there to know that let you know that he's making something up. Any of you who are parents, you think about when your kids told you're porky. They never just look straight at you. Their eyes flip in one direction or the other depending on the orientation of dominance, left or right hand. So I just want to go through this briefly because I don't want to take too much time with it. But we have this range of sensory and sensory acuity or sensory awarenesses, so that our thinking is often revealed, our thinking system is often revealed in the language that we use. So it doesn't mean nothing when a person says, that's as clear as crystal to me. Does that mean nothing? Are they just words? Well, possibly, but most frequently not. What that person is really telling you is, this is the way I think. This is my representational system. I'm a visual person. Now, don't be confused, because all of us have visual memories. But visual people can very clearly see things. You were saying about the balloon, and even though you didn't give me any colour, it was really interesting. I was watching your eyes as you told me. I said, did you see colour? And you checked, and you didn't. And then your words came, no, I didn't see colour, it was just saw a balloon, like that. So there was this indication here. So we've got visual capacity, we've got auditory capacity, we've got kinesthetic or feeling capacity. So let's say that you came along and you said to me, I hope I'm not getting into some territory that I shouldn't, but you came along and you said, oh, I've had a really bad thing happen to me. My friends are just dumping on me. They're not giving me a fair shake. And I said to you, what's your name?
Michaela.
Michaela, I said to you, Michaela, well, I wonder if you just close your eyes a moment and just get a picture of that in your mind. That would be stupid, because you have just used words that reveal to me that it's your feelings that you're dealing with. You use words like dumped on. You know, they're not giving their fair shake, and different statements like that. So if I said, oh, well, just sit back there and get a nice picture in your mind, I would be crossing across the way you're currently thinking. Now, I may want to help you to get back to what most probably would be your dominant representational system, but I'd have to know what that was, and then that would be my intent to get you back there. But it'd be very silly if I just went, you're there, and I go straight there, or I go straight here. Do you know what I mean by that? I'm talking about that I start to talk about auditory things. Some people will say, you know, that's as clear as a bell. Well, are they just using words? And what do people mean when they say, there's a part of me that really wants to go for this, but there's another part doesn't? There's another part is pulling back. It's an unconscious acknowledgement of the two aspects of our thinking. You have a conscious mind, you have an unconscious mind. And when we use phrases like that, I believe that they are simply not random phrases, but they are unconscious acknowledgements of internal states. So, we've got this situation here where the movement of eyes reveal stuff about them. The choices are visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and two other ones, olfactory and gustatory. Gustatory is taste, olfactory is odour. I can identify with what you said. If I smell honeysuckle, I'm 9 years old, can't help us, and I'm back on my grandparents' veranda in Grafton, and a big steam train has just gone past because my grandfather used to open and shut the gates when I was a kid on the Sydney, Grafton or Murwillumbah line. So you have these connections in the mind. If you listen to your clients, and this is the third aspect of adding in, if you listen to your clients, if you watch your clients, if you breathe with your clients, they are going to offer you information that will enable you to talk intelligently to them. We would dismiss, even if you don't understand or don't like the idea or think that there's that's a bit sus, this business of eye movement. But if you ignore the fact that people will think visually or think auditorily or think kinesthetically, if you ignore that, your language has no hope of connecting in that seeking of rapport with the individual. Diane and I go to the movies. She wants to sit in the middle. I want to sit over on the side. I'm auditory, she's visual. So we've got to say, well, now what's it going to be today? She'll say to me, where do you want to sit today? Being such a good, loyal husband, I'll say, well, look, wherever you want to sit, I'll sit. But I hate it. And if I've got to sit in the middle, I want to sit on the end of the seat, end of the row, because it suits my representational system. And I make this loving compromise and let her sit, not quite in the middle, but more in the middle than not, so that satisfies her. I promise you, the people that you are talking to, the people that come to you, without you being smart enough to work it out, they have a dominant representational system. And if you listen to them, they will reveal that. And you can then adjust your language so that what you're saying makes sense. I like the example you used before, where it's like Chinese whispers. I say to Michael, Milton Erickson was an extraordinarily interesting pioneer in the field of hypnotherapy and psychology. Michael sits there and nods his head, but I wonder what you really have done with the interpretation of what I've said to you. Who's Milton Erickson?
He's like the founder of sort of what we're studying here.
Okay, all right, that's good. And he's a pioneer in a change in hypnosis, or a change in the practice of hypnosis and so on. So I can say those things to you, and if I said more complex things about the research work of somebody like Ernest Rossi and so on, you know, you could nod your head, but you might be at sea. So when I'm talking to an individual, I don't want to talk down to that person. I just want to connect through communication in a way that makes sense to that person. See, it'd be pretty silly if I thought that you really understood everything that I said to you if I was delivering some kind of lecture. So what I have to do is to find out a way, and let's say this group. I'm looking at this group, and you're telling me some things. Some of you are kind of, you know, like this, and some of you are looking interested and looking eager, and some of you, I'm not giving anything away. But that's all right. That's who you are, and that's your personality, and that's the way you are in this room. But my task is to find ways to connect with as many people as I can in what I've said. For many, many years, from Darwin to Melbourne, I've travelled around talking to groups of people, large groups of people, small groups of people, and it's always been with the purpose of helping some students set up a practice or introducing a therapist into a district. So you look around, and I can talk all night about hypnosis, though. But like the Irishman said, it's better felt than telt. And so it's better for me to find somebody in an audience and hypnotise them and then talk from there about hypnosis and what aspect of it is. But, you know, if somebody's sitting there like this, and they've been like that all through the address, or as far as we've gone at that time, what a deal I'd be if I picked that person, you know. So you watch carefully, and you see somebody might laugh a bit at some of your lame jokes, or somebody might show intrigue about some metaphor or story or case history or whatever that you tell, and you suss out in your own mind who you might use as a subject there. Now, translating that into my work, your work as a salesperson. Now, this afternoon I've sold 2 courses. That'd be chicken feed compared, you know, to the money that you guys deal with in real estate. But to me, you know, it's going to knock a hole in $10,000. So I'm pretty chuffed about that. I've sat down with 2 people that I've never met before, and I've, to the best of my ability, answered their questions. But you'd have to believe that there's a little bit of salesman in me, and I'm sort of sitting there with that person, and I want to be truthful to the person, and I want to act out of integrity to the person, but I also want to engage that person. And so 2 best friends walked out of the office one after another this afternoon, and one of them's phoned me up since and said, I'm ready to pay the money. Where do I pay the money? And I feel really good about that, because I have a product that I'm proud of. I have a background of supporting and training, but then helping people get their businesses started. So I've got every confidence that these 2 people are good. So I feel good about myself. Now, you, in your work, whatever it is that you are selling, these elements are important to you. You want to find a way to connect the best you can with this person who's come to you. The best place to start is to begin to build rapport. Rapport is connectedness, and it can be done very simply by training yourself to observe. If you don't observe, you don't know what's going on. If you don't check all the time through those things that help you to know that you've achieved rapport, then you're just waffling. But to do it, have a thrill. Really set yourself the task. I don't agree with Glenn. Don't worry about sitting on a train or something. The very next person that presents themselves to you, fix your inner beady eye on them and begin to just test a little bit, very subtly. Test a little bit. This ability to recognise what the breathing rhythm of that person means. How may I, through my language and my recognition of the way they think, how may I facilitate a better connection with this person? You can't be wrong. Folks, it's just on 10 o'clock. I didn't realise that, I'm sorry. So there's no fancy wind up, because I know you've got a long way to drive, you folk, but can I say, I appreciate your attention, and we haven't, well, no, we actually have, but we've got a little bit further than I expected to. But if you elect to come back next week, please come back being prepared to be involved in some practical exercises around not just the things we've talked about tonight, but extending that a little bit, but incorporating those things that we've talked about tonight. And Michael, I'm sorry, I've sort of run out of time and I can't do what I was going to do. Will you say, if you come next time, you're in the hot seat. Thank you very much for your attention. You still gnaw my trepidation. And I really enjoyed talking to you.